conventional assessments and the way the assessments are being conducted are usually standardized for everyone, the same test for everyone, the same exam for everyone, and regardless of the students' unique skills, learning styles, and needs. This approach is not only inefficient, but it also leads to generalized results and it doesn't accurately reflect individual competencies. Now, nowadays, we call it teaching learning assessment cycle because it is such an important part. So, we teach, we measure, we reflect, and we plan and improve. This word is very important, plan and improve, and then teach again and go back to that same cycle. And it goes on. So, it is a never ending process.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to Yes Talks. The session today is titled The Dawn of Assessment. The speaker with us today is Dr. Mithu Pal. Dr. Mithu works as Academic Supervisor at Cambridge School, New Delhi. She holds a master's degree in Biotechnology from IIT Roorkee and a doctorate in education from Institute of Advanced Studies in Education at Jamia Millia University. Dr. Mithu is also an accomplished singer, composer, and poet, and she has been associated with Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch for more than 15 years now. Welcome, Mithu Di. We are so glad to have you with us as a speaker today. Looking forward to an interesting session. Over to you.
Namaste, everyone. Arunima just said, she told about the topic, the dawn of assessment. And it may seem funny, but a few days back, while I was having lunch at the dining room at the ashram, so happened to get into a discussion with Akashi, who is a very regular over here. And when he heard the topic, he interpreted it as DAWN dawn. So we clarified his doubt. And it is the topic is actually the dawn of assessment. And hopefully, by the end of the talk, we would also like to uh, rack our brains and think how this dawn, DON, can, and there is a need for it to turn into DAWN, dawn. So we all know that the world is in a crisis now, and education is also in a crisis. And but somehow, education is in fact the key to overcoming all crises, whether it is in the world, whether it is in our life, everywhere. Education is the key because through education we are creating generations who will look after the future. And also, it is education that shows the path to all of us. Now, when we talk of education, we are going to talk about assessment, school education, school assessments. And when we talk of school education or any education, we often ask these three questions. Why are we teaching? What are we teaching? And how are we teaching? Now, assessment is a very integral part of education. And we also need, looking at the scenario today of assessments, the inflated, you can say, image it has got, and rightfully so, because there is so much happening around assessment. It is almost like people talk about the weather, but nobody does anything about the weather. So, assessment today is also in a similar, one can say, in a similar boat. People are talking about assessments. It's become a very fashionable term. It has also taken a very cliched image. Nevertheless, it has got inflated so much that lives are getting destroyed. There is so much of anxiety and stress around assessments, tests, evaluations, and report cards, syllabus. And these are like, these are like the ding dong of the bell that never stops. Once we embark on the school education or the child takes admission into the school, whether it is teachers, whether it is parents, whether it is students, आप assessment से बच तो नहीं सकते. And all of us have undergone this. And so assessment is a part of the teaching learning cycle, an integral part of teaching learning cycle. And assessment can happen only after you teach. So we need to ask these three very basic questions to assessment as well. Why are we assessing? What are we assessing? And how are we assessing? What is going wrong? What is it that doesn't seem to fit into the current scenario of education that is ailing the system of education, that is ailing assessments today, that it has become almost like a fearful word. So I'll start sharing my screen now. So after this brief introduction, let us move on. Now, when we look at the definitions of assessment, which we read in B.Ed and M.Ed and all these courses, it goes something like this. Assessment is the systematic basis for making inferences about the learning and development of students. And there's another one, and similar ones. It is the process of defining, selecting, designing, collecting, analyzing, interpreting, and using information to increase students' learning and developments. So when I used to read at these definitions, I used to really feel very tired. So many different words, so many difficult words. Nevertheless, they are true because it's quite an accurate definition of assessment. Now, definition seems very fancy, very impressive, but after almost 30 years of being in school education, one thing I have learned is that all assessments, put in very simple terms, is to design and redesign methods to help learn better and teach better and effectively. So assessments should basically, being in the teaching learning cycle, assessments, what is the role of assessments? So here we are embarking on this question, why do we assess? And let's look at first at the current scenario of assessments, to sum it up briefly. However, I cannot sum it up fully because I do not know what crisis is going on in the world. Yes, in the Indian education system where I have been placed, uh, I can speak a bit. So, but overall, even when you see the world situation of assessments in school education, it's almost like one size fits all, meaning conventional assessments and the way the assessments have been uh, are being conducted are usually standardized for everyone, the same test for everyone, the same exam for everyone, and regardless of the students' unique skills, learning styles, and needs. This approach is not only inefficient, but it also leads to generalized results and it doesn't accurately reflect individual competencies. Then it is static and outdated. Hardly any kind of changes. People talk about a lot of changes happening in assessments, lot of changes, but ghum fir ke, round and round we go, but we end up seeing almost the same scenario and the same kind of patterns and the same kind of questions which are targeting rote memorization and everything that is in the textbook. And hardly anything is dealing in the test paper about unique skills of the child or the learning styles. A child may be having a different learning style. Does it cater to that? So it is static and outdated. And we really have to look at it. Really need to look at it in the way that we should not be changing it just because it has become static and outdated. We also should really look at the patterns that we have been blindly following when it comes to assessments. And there is a lack of real world application. You take up any test paper, any school test paper, any exam paper, you will see this scenario. The real world application is often missing. And even if it is put in the name of real world application or application based questions or so called HOTS question, as they put it in the board exam paper, still we see that it is only pertaining to the NCRT textbook or the textbooks which the children have been studying. Now, so many tests, there have been changes, the government also has been working. And in 1980s, there was something which NCRT came out with, and that was the minimum learning levels. And it was a big thing. because it kind of decided that, okay, what is the basic minimum level countrywide in every grade? It was a big move. But then nothing happened after that. So people were going gaga gaga over that, and people were discussing it, but certainly nothing moved for another 20 years. And in 2005, the National Curriculum Framework came, which of course it was again a big leap because it started talking about the quality of education. And assessments did find a place in the NCF in quite a prominent way. So then we have the National Education Policy, now 2020. Uh, National Education Policy defines education as a 360-degree assessment. Now, it means a holistic assessment, and it means that the assessment which uh, deals or takes care of, uh, you can say, different aspects of teaching or different aspects of the learning that the child undergoes in school education. Then, often there is, you can say, now when the CCE came, when the continuous and comprehensive evaluation thing came, it came, but it was literally put on the higher classes, and there was no kind of guideline or handbook given how the teachers are going to deal with it, how the schools are going to deal with it. It was a big change. So finally, again, people started racking their brains, educationists started racking their brains, but nothing concrete so far has come. We all realize the importance of assessments and how they need to be done, but somewhere the system has gone into a, one can say, a catch 22 situation, that we are, even well meaning educationists, even well meaning systems, it's so large a problem that when they try to induce it, it causes a ripple effect and it causes a bounce, and then everybody, what is happening in the tests and exams, it's a very circus scene. Everybody are seen as achievements, grades are seen as achievements, grades are seen as achievement, and it is at a very surface level. Hardly we are touching on the skill part, whereas it is the skills that need to be assessed. But what the tests and exams are doing right now is they are only basing it on marks, grades, percentage, and that is considered to be as a major achievement. There is so much of a conversation among mothers and teachers, half a mark here, half a mark there. Even the students are not left untouched. Even they, when they get the question paper for a review, when the teacher gives it to them, they are only, first of all, they are only seeing kitne number mile, how many marks have I got. So, and so many tests in the name of continuous and comprehensive evaluation, so many learning cycles in the syllabus, and as many learning cycles, as many tests. So we say that we will reduce the quantum of the test, but then the frequency of the test increases. And where is that valuable teaching time that the teacher can spend in the classroom teaching the topic and dealing with all the problems that the children are facing, focusing more on the skills, that time gets reduced drastically. Then the result analysis goes. The results come, and then the, again, what is it trying to tell me? Okay, so many students have failed, so many students have passed, so many students have got average mark. So the result analysis sticks itself to only that. Where is the, there is nothing that is being happening around, that if, okay, if there is a topic in which students are doing miserably, or if there is a topic in which students have done really very well, we really need to look at the method that we have been following, the pedagogy. And after reflecting, it has to reflect on the pedagogy and it has to be modified and changed. And that is the main role of the assessments. But here, the result analysis woes are very, very superficial, but scary nevertheless. Then the time and cost. How much time is going in the assessments? Too much time is going in the assessments, whether we call it summative or formative, or whether we call it term exams or semester exams, or whether we call surprise tests or whatever it is, there is time involved. There is time involved in creating the question paper or taking the test, then doing marking it or corrections, and finding out where the student is going wrong, and then giving that feedback to the student, the parents, and the, one can say, the school administrators. And the cost, of course, cost in terms of energy also, not only in terms of financial and resources, but also in terms of energy. Then there is very limited feedback and scope for improvement. Limited feedback, we are only giving marks, grades, but a detailed information to the parent to exactly where the child needs to put in extra effort, or what are the even the talents that the child has. Somehow we are all losing out on that. Then of course we cannot miss out on the stress and the anxiety that everybody is undergoing. The students, the teachers, the parents, the school administrators, everybody. There is so much of stress around examination time. There is so much of stress and anxiety in creating the question papers. In And there is so much of stress and anxiety that when the question papers go home, what else the parents will come up with, or what haggling will happen around the marks. So and also these kind of things go on all the time, round and round. So one tends to feel, is it assessments really or stress assessments? It's causing so much of stress. Now look at this poor child. The child is asking us something. At the center of education is the child. He says, if I can't learn the way you teach, why can't you teach me the way I learn? It's a very simple thing, but a very profound thing coming from a child's mind. And it is a direct reflection on what assessments should be doing. If the child is not learning through a proper method, if there is a teaching learning cycle and the child has not learned, so one needs to really look what is happening in that teaching learning cycle. Why are the children not learning, or what is the difficulty that the child is facing? And assessments, when the results of the assessment come, they should reflect, or they do reflect on that. And then one needs to go back, redesign the method, or look at the pedagogy very carefully, tweak it or modify it or make accommodations. Now, if we look at the teaching learning cycle, here is a very simple diagram, and teaching learning cycle is basically this. This is the one of the simplest diagrams I could get. Plan, where the teacher is writing the outcomes. In every class, there is a, or in every topic, there are, you can say, learning outcomes which the teacher targets. Okay. And then the teacher teaches it, and the students are learning and check. So assessment is a checkpoint. Okay. We check, we assess the student work. And then what? Then we have to act. The actual action in the classroom is this step. Of course, the steps are there. But if we miss out on this, then the same kind of teaching, irrespective of whether the child is learning or not, will go on happening. This is the assessment cycle. It's a part of the teaching learning. Now, nowadays, we call it teaching learning assessment cycle because it is such an important part. So we teach, we measure, we reflect, and we plan and improve. This word is very important: plan and improve, and then teach again and go back to that same cycle. And it goes on. So it is a never ending process. Today's scenario is syllabus, tests, exams, report cards, marks, the easiest currency in tests and exams. So, how much are we able to deal with all this? What has happened has happened. We are fallen into this trap, and it's time that we really have to jerk ourselves and do something about it. So, this is a typical scenario. So, here is the teacher and all different students. You can see how much different they are. For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. And Albert Einstein, he had said that everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. And something similar or exactly the same is being depicted in this cartoon. So it's a very hard hitting educational cartoon. It's used everywhere now. But it's also time that if it is hard hitting, we also have to get those jerks, and we also have to sit up and take notice. And then this very fashionable debate about formative and summative assessment. Michael Scriven in 1967, he actually coined these terms, formative assessment and summative assessment. And regarding these, he had said something similar to what Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had talked about the Constitution when the Constitution was formed. It's one of the best constitutions in the world, he said, but if it falls into the hands of wrong people, it can be misused largely. And Michael Scriven said something very similar about formative and summative assessments. He said basically, formative and summative assessments are the same. It is how you are going to use it that is going to make a difference. And if it is skewed, if the formative assessments are skewed or if the summative assessment is skewed, that means you have too many summative assessments or too many formative assessments, then also it is it is it is going to, you can say, it is not going to serve the purpose. So there has to be a balance, and it has to be a very need based. It cannot be just because you know formative assessments are in smaller portions you are testing, they are easier, so you go on taking that. And somewhere summative assessments also reflect largely on the systems and the changes that need to be brought in the system in a large way. And formative assessments are easy feedbacks for the teacher, and they are the for shorter duration, shorter, you can say, units that they are taken. Something like this maybe can be said about summative and formative. On a lighter note, when the cook tastes the soup, that's formative assessment. When the customer tastes the soup, that's summative assessment. So summative assessments are usually taken at the end of semester or unit in large chunks, and formative is while the teacher is teaching or while a subject is being taught, those modules or those topics are being taught. There is a The teacher needs a direct feedback whether the students are understanding it or not. If they are not understanding, she has to go back, reteach the topic, and she has to really look into what is, because learning, you can say, it builds on the previous learning. So like Bruner's, if you've heard of Bruner's philosophy, that knowledge always builds on the pre-existing knowledge from the simple to the complex. So if we miss out on the simple steps, the of course the it's going to create confusion in the upper rungs. And in the teaching learning assessment cycle, who are actually the stakeholders? And a short thing about it is that students, teachers, parents, school administrators, school board members, support staff, and also government officials today, directorate members of the directorate, education of directorate, uh, and broader community. And we cannot miss out on this community aspect, because each stakeholders group plays a unique role in supporting student learning and the overall educational experience of the child. This is often neglected, and but it means that education is is also largely a very collective phenomenon. You educate one child, that just like they say that you educate the mother, you educate the whole family. So you educate a child or student, you are actually educating the future. You are paving a cleaner, safer, and a happier path for the future generations. So this was basically, till this part, we were actually looking at why do we need to assess. It's only to reflect, to get information, and look at the methodologies or look at our own pedagogies, what have worked and what have not worked. Those that have not worked, we really need to look at the reasons why they have not worked. Is it because the method is incorrect, or is it because the child was not ready for it? Is it because uh, the it was too easy for the child, or is it because it was too difficult for the child? So all these questions the teacher knows best, and she has to ask these questions. If a child is repeatedly not understanding in the summative assessments, or it is a clear indication there is a block somewhere, and that's where the sensitivity, the consciousness of the teacher has to be brought in. So, assessment we see it is not only about tests, syllabus, exams, marks, achievements, it is also a reflection on the consciousness of the teachers, the parents, whosoever is the caretaker of the child. What are we assessing and how? So, what exactly do we assess and how? Of course, we say whatever we teach, we assess. Now, these are again some words which have become very popular: assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning. It is only because when are we assessing and how are we assessing plays a very important role. And assessment of learning is basically a kind of an assessment which the teacher does or an educator does is it assists the teachers in getting evidence of student learning to for her to set the standards for the next lot that she's going to teach, or sometimes it is also referred to as the summative assessment. So assessment of learning is largely, we can say in general terms, we can also equate it to summative assessments. And it usually occurs at defined key points during a teaching work or at the end of a unit, term, or semester, and may be used to rank or grade students. It is usually done like that. It is not necessary, but it is usually done like that. And the effectiveness of assessment of learning for grading or ranking purposes depends, this is very important, that it depends on the validity, reliability, and the weighing placed on one task, whether that task is relevant, whether and if the system is permitting that, and if it is working, then only that can be standardized. Its effectiveness as an opportunity for learning depends on the nature and quality of the feedback. Again, we see that the nature and quality always depends on the feedback. And then, based on the feedback, the next action has to be taken. Assessment for learning involves teachers using evidence about students' knowledge, understanding, and skills to inform their teaching and to inform about the learning that is happening in smaller chunks, sometimes referred to also as formative assessment. And it usually occurs throughout the teaching and the learning process. So this is the continuous part of the assessment that keeps on happening. And sometimes even without the tests and the exams, the teacher can assess while teaching. There are ways and means for how the teacher can do it. And if the teacher is sympathetic, and if the teacher is very observant, and if the teacher is a very conscientious teacher, then this becomes her greatest tool in handling the student. And then the learning that happens in the student is very rapid and very fast. And also, there is a very strong bond which can get connected at this time between the teacher and the student. Then, assessment as learning is often neglected because it is the learning that is happening while the assessment is going on. So, it happens when students are their own assessors, when we assess our own selves. So it is about self assessment. Students monitor their own learning, ask questions, and use a range of strategies to decide what they know and can do, and how to use assessment for new learning. So this is a very, you can say, very effective tool in where the child himself or the learner himself is able to assess his own skills, his own abilities, his own inclinations, his own tendencies. And nevertheless, a balance of the three has to be maintained. And uh, so these assessments of learning, for learning, and as learning play important roles. And often out of the three, the most neglected is the last, that is the assessment as learning, whereas that needs to now pick up and become a very important tool of assessment, because that not only does it educate the student, it also teaches the student how to reflect on his or her own self. Now, when we talk of assessments, it is a big part of the teaching learning process. And as we move on from assessment for learning of learning, and as we move towards this assessment as learning, we should really take, because it is such an important part of the teaching, the way you teach will also indicate the way the assessments have to take place. And for any teacher who is assessing, for anybody who is assessing, or any problem that we face in life, these three principles of true learning are always valid. You know, Sri Aurobindo was the first person to have talked of and written about a national policy of education when nobody was talking, when the education itself was undergoing a catharsis because of the British influence and all. So he could foresee what importance a national policy of education has in education. Now, today we talk of NEPs, and NEPs are coming up, and कहते हैं ना देर से आए देर आए लेकिन दुरुस्त आए, लेकिन it is happening now. And we must, if we just follow these three principles of true learning, it is not only the teaching learning, it is the teaching learning that happens in everybody. And in every situation, these three principles hold true. The first principle of true teaching is that Sri Aurobindo says that nothing can be taught. Knowledge is always there, it is existing. And you cannot teach knowledge, you can only show the child the ways and means of attaining that knowledge. And when we talk of the ways and the means, we are actually talking about the skills of attaining that knowledge. And it is largely here that the assessments should happen around the skills and not about how much the child knows after memorization, after rote learning, after going through the chapter over and over again. So, Swami Vivekananda, he said something very powerful. He says, knowledge, whether secular or spiritual, lies dormant within us. And just as fire exists within flint, needing only the friction of experience to emerge, so too does wisdom reside in every soul. The role of education, therefore, is not to impose, but to evoke, and to remove the veils of ignorance and allow inner clarity to shine. Now, I had read this in my early 20s when I was undergoing a catharsis in my own life, and which brought me to the field of education. And as a 20-year-old, this idea actually shook me. I realized that I wasn't stupid for not understanding something right away. I was simply peeling layers from my mind's eye. I was in the sacred process of discovery, not in a race of rote memorization. I had suffered like this as a childhood also. It was very easy for me to do rote learning, and I was into that habit of zor zor se padna. You know, you read one thing over and over and again, usko rat lo. And most of my friends were also doing it. So this actually, when I read this, it actually shook me. So education is not filling, but about unfolding. And that's when we see this first principle, nothing can be taught. And Sri Aurobindo, he said that true learning is not merely the transmission of information from teachers to student. And what in our assessments we are doing now, we are just focusing on this, how much the child knows, how much knowledge he has. And the more the knowledge, the wow factor increases. Instead, the teacher is only a guide and a helper, suggesting paths and facilitating the student's own discovery and acquisition of knowledge. So here is something he directly hinted at: the skill-based education. The student must be actively involved in the learning process. The responsibility of the learning lies with the learner, they say, and he has to be actively involved. And how can he be actively involved if he is shunned, if he is made to stop, if he is, one can say, shut up in the early stages only? A wrong answer is criticized, a wrong answer is discouraged. So all these things we have to really look into what we are doing. The student, then the second principle Sri Aurobindo says is that it's a very interesting one. The mind has to be consulted in its own growth. The readiness of the child has to be taken into consideration. Yes, today, thankfully, fortunately, we are also talking about different learning styles that the student has. Some students learn by doing, some students learn by reflecting, some students need to hear, and students need to hero worship. Some students learn by experience. Some students, there are so many ways a student can basically learn. And if we are able to trap, if we are able to tap into this kind of an energy that the student has, it's not that the student will learn only by one learning style. He will also have other, but the dominant learning style would be one or two. So if we are able to tap into that ability and that energy of the child, how much easier our work will become and how much effective our teaching can be. And that is why it is also, one can say, it is also recommended that when we are planning our lessons, we have to also take care of the learning styles. So there must be in that lesson something interesting, something doable, which caters to the learning style of almost every child. If we see a bunch of students, we may say, okay, there are 40 students, and we cannot cater to all 40 different learning styles. But at least we can group them, and we can at least have 5 to 6 activities or 5 to 6 interesting things which will cater to a child with those kind of learning styles. And it is possible. It is possible, and many teachers are doing it, and that is the, you can say, the hearty part of it. Now the education should nurture the mind's inherent development, and Sri Aurobindo believed that the teacher should work with the students existing knowledge and interests to foster real growth in the child. The third principle of Sri Aurobindo of of true learning, he says, is working from near to far. As B.Ed and M.Ed students, we have all learned about the maxims of education, which are true till today. It is this: from the near to the far, from the simple to the complex, from the concrete to the abstract. Something that the child has already experienced. It is near, he knows, he feels it, he understands it. Then we can handhold the child and take him to something which he has the capacity to do, and he only needs a nudge, he only needs guidance, he only needs help, and then he will be able to do it on his own. After all, the whole aim is to make mature individuals who are free, and this freedom is not about doing anything that they want. It's about how to use whatever they have learned in a good way, in all goodness, and for the benefit of everybody. And that is the whole aim of education. In essence, Sri Aurobindo's principles, these three principles, they emphasize self discovery, individual growth, and practical application as key components of true teaching. And here is something, you can say it is a recommendation. A lot of, you can say, research is also happening in this. But ultimately, whether we are a student, we are if we consider ourselves lifelong students, then self assessment, we can say, it fosters conscious learning. And this is where, when I was speaking of assessment as learning, it plays a very important role. I remember, when I had enrolled for my PhD course, it is a requirement for us to clear 2 units, one unit of my choice, and the other unit is educational statistics. And I was very weak in statistics and I had a phobia of statistics and maths and things like that. Fortunately, we had a professor, Professor Ejaz, and one day they had to also take tests and they were marked. And then we were allowed to, present our first, after completing 1 year, then we can actually, you can say, formalize our PhD topic. So in that test, he came into the class and the first thing he said was, everybody take out everything that you have, your phones, your books, your chits that you have hidden in the pencil boxes, your notes, your calculators, you take out everything. And I will give you just two questions. So, and he gave us two questions. And the answers were not in any textbook or in any that we could figure out. So, you really had to come out of the comfort zone. And I realized that here is something that was happening, which we today call experiential learning. And here is something that happened to me where assessment, as I got a good taste of what is assessment as learning. So, whatever I had learned, not only in that course, 6 month course, I had to really go back into what I had learned. And in those two questions, I had to also unlearn many things. And so this was an eye opener. And this is a very concrete example. And I'm very happy that I underwent this. Of course, I did not score very well, but I passed. But it somehow, it, it made me realize that textbooks and whatever help we had, ultimately the help comes actually from within with confidence, and something works only if you really really concentrate well. And for that concentration to build well, uh, these days I have started suggesting a lot of, in fact that was a turning point in the way I looked at assessments. I had never explored this area of assessment, and it also gave me a very big picture of myself as a student. So here the self assessment, kahin na kahin pe, I did a very big self assessment about myself. And later on, this helped me. And today, all my thanks to Professor Ejaz, that whenever I was getting stuck in my PhD work, I would often go back and think about this experience that I had. And because in my PhD, I had to create a package for assessment. So that was a very big help that I got from just this experience. And it has always stayed with me. So imagine if we can give our students such kind of experiences right from the beginning. Will they not learn about self assessment from a very early age? And will they not become conscious learners from a very early age? Now, there are ways and means of uh, doing good assessments. Assessments are important. We can't do away without it. However, trauma they may be causing us, we still can't do without it. So, best, let's find out ways and means of how we can do them effectively, which doesn't cause stress and anxiety, and which can be also joy, and it can also relax everybody around in the field of education. Collaboration. Earlier, people were talking about cooperative learning. When learning happens through collaboration, the assessment also can happen through collaboration. And it is wonderful if we can create those collaborative groups. Only we need to rack our brains and we need to study the students very nicely, very well, very intricately, observe them. And then we can form collaborative groups where the students can be grouped and every student is accountable for what they are learning and presenting. Project methods should always work, and they do work on collaboration, largely collaborative. Then experiential learning. Experiential learning is when you give the experience of the learning to the uh, child. So the child experiences And in this, one has to come out of the comfort zone. Somehow, we have also made many things very easy for our children. बच्चों ये syllabus है, this is the topic, the questions will come from this chapter. You, for this unit test, you need to study 3 chapters, and these are the, you can say, these are the main areas, the subtopics, and this is happening in the schools a lot. So somewhere we are taking away their experiential learning, the time which could be spent in giving the child a true experience. uh, I had once attended an experiential learning workshop where they, as a group, 40 teachers were taken to Jim Corbett National Park in a village, near a village called Kiara Village. And what experiential learning does is that it will take you out of the comfort zone. So we were just put in the jungle with only a tent and a torchlight, and we didn't have much luggage. And we were made to stay just near a river. On the backside of the river, our tents were there, and in the night you could hear the growling of the tigers. You could hear the growl of, wild animals. You could not sleep at night, and everybody was given a different animal to study. Go into the jungle and study, and it actually happened. And I was given porcupine. I had only heard of porcupine. I had never even seen a porcupine. But in the jungle, I found a porcupine. I study, and today I can say I know everything about porcupines. And we had to do it on our own through collaboration, through experiential learning. We had to look for the burrows. We had to, and the library was there, the books were there, but it was on us to discover as much. And then, not only that, that experience was linked to social studies, it was linked to English, it was linked to many subjects, maths, everything. In the end, we also had to write a story about porcupine, or the animal that was allocated to us. And it was a wonderful experience. And I'm very happy that in Delhi, few schools have started, they have totally turned into experiential learning schools. And this is something very wonderful that can happen even in the conventional and even in those schools. So when the learning is experiential, the assessment is automatically happening. It's automatically, there is a self assessment happening all the time. The child or the student is has to figure out what works for him and what does not work for him. So he is actually put into that teaching learning cycle automatically, and he is the teacher and he is also the student. So it's a wonderful way of exploring this part, and uh, it takes care of a lot of things that we can avoid all that stress of tests, evaluations, exams all the time, and then there are certain invisible or hidden assessments that are going all the time, and the teacher also has to be mindful of that. And a good teacher uses this invisible or hidden assessments when the time comes. you know she's observing the child quietly when she has a bubble time with the child, when she has a one-to-one conversation with the child, or when she is writing a positive note for the child, or when she is having just a me time with the child, or when she is telling something and she gets a hearty response from the students. So that itself is an assessment for the teacher, and it is a very motivating assessment for the teacher. So basically, it's assessments. When we are conducting the assessments, we need to make sure that somewhere there is an increased, we are able to bring an increased self awareness in the child, and this leads to an improved decision making in the child, and automatically we find that it will enhance the performance of the child, whether it is a summative assessment or a formative assessment. And there is a greater motivation for the child. There is also personal growth, and it largely the child understands that his intentions and his sincerity and his involvement in a certain thing consciously can bring wonderful results. And that aha feeling that comes, yes, I can do it. I can do it on my own. If I don't know how to do it, I know the ways and means of asking somebody, going here, looking it up in the encyclopedia, doing an extra bit of research. coming out of my comfort zone, bringing, and I have seen students and also experienced it that when you start learning a musical instrument or a different language, when you start learning a different language, these things are so, they come to you so naturally. You don't feel any stress, and the assessment is also happening within them. So I strongly feel today that being right is not always right. So if, and failures are just as right. Somewhere when we are conducting the tests, the evaluations, the assessments, how can we take away the fear from the child? How can we take away the shame? How can we take away this judgmental attitude which is created around tests and evaluations? So even in a general scenario, if the teacher is conducting a test or she has done an assessment and she finds that everybody has scored 100%, so is she right in assuming that she has taught a good class? So somewhere she also has to look within. Maybe the questions were too easy, or maybe I have asked something, or maybe I gave some, something is wrong. कई बार होता है कि you feel that this doesn't seem very right. ऐसा तो नहीं हो सकता. So, and failures are just as right. This is very important because a child will always not score full marks or will not hit upon the answer immediately. Whether the question is simple or difficult doesn't matter. But if the child is also giving a wrong answer, if the child is, in fact, even if the child is failing, or as we put it in quotes, fail ho gaya or D grade mil gaya and things like that. So the child has to be, one has to also create a system in the assessments where the child understands that this failure indicates something to him or is asking him to do something. So, Arunima, am I on time or am I?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So, this has to be kept in mind. And very importantly, the most effective evaluation comes from someone who sits beside us and helps us, besides us, and helps us grow. And when for the child, it could be the parent, the teacher, an educator, a close friend. But for everybody, what is that? Who is that someone who sits beside us and helps us grow? And here I'm pointing to something that if we look at a child and we see the divinity in the child, and we engage, and somehow we are able to engage the soul of the child, and we look at the child as a soul who has come here for evolution, who has come for growth, then education becomes more than just memorization and information transfer. This automatically takes care of that. It becomes a process of self discovery where students connect with their passions, values, and a sense of purpose. And when we look at the child and when we look at the student in this way, while we are assessing, this can create a profound and lasting understanding of the materials, as students are learning is not only for learning facts but also exploring their own relationship with the subject matter, how well they are able to connect to that, are they able to see the deeper picture of that subject and connect to that. So it is basically connection of one soul with another soul. The soul of the child connects to the soul of the subject, and when that happens, magic happens. So soulful education encourages students to ask these questions that we are saying: why, what, how. So the child himself is going to ask that, and he will get the answers. And because when the soul to soul connection is made, nothing is a Nothing is an obstacle then. So, in essence, bringing the soul into education means recognizing the whole child, the mind, body, and soul, and then foster the holistic development. So, preparing them only for not only for academic and career success, but also for leading meaningful, fulfilling lives and contributing positively to the society. As Rumi says, there is a voice that doesn't use words, listen. And if we somehow we are able to really tap into that with the child, if the child starts understanding this, and for this there is hard work which is required. It's not that it will happen on its own. So the ambience, the environment, the situations, the love and the consciousness around the child, when he experiences that, then this automatically flourishes. The beautiful story, I'm reminded of Dr. Bijlani's beautiful story, Kavya makes up her mind. So where there is a turmoil and she hears her own voice, and this voice would not let her rest. And she finally admits to what she had done, stealing the hair clip, and she confesses on her own. Nobody told her. So what told her was her soul. So that helped her make up her mind. So when the soul is brought into education, self-assessment that I was talking of, self-assessment becomes the golden bridge between teaching and learning. Self-assessment is the first step to all assessment. And here I speak with a responsibility. And basically, what is education? Education is the manifestation of the perfection already in man, as Swami Vivekananda said. Character first, career second. And we want that education, we want that education by which character is formed. Strength of mind is increased, the intellect is expanded, and by which one can stand on one's own feet. So, if education is about this, assessment is also about this. Assessment is about bringing the child and giving the child this kind of an education so that we can reflect on our own methods, our own ways of teaching, and make sure that the child is experiencing this and the child is somehow able to connect with his soul. Training of the emotions, training of the feelings, like in Dr. Bijlani's book, no, I came across this that even a terrorist is very intelligent, no, he has brains, otherwise he would not become a terrorist. But how he is using his brain, you know, and a knife can be used to even kill a person, and a knife can be used to chop vegetables and fruits beautifully. So, so, so here is I'm nearing the end of my talk. We have to bring in this dawn, and where the soul sees the sun, the light, and is able to relate to that in education. It's a beautiful field, it's a beautiful work, education. And it it is not, it is a very humbling experience to teach children because somewhere it also makes us a better person and it makes us a perpetual student. How can I teach something to the student if I don't know it myself? So I remember still when I started first teaching, I could never understand mole concept in my school life. But only when I started teaching mole concept to class 9, it's not a joke, but all 40 of them, they could solve anything on mole concept because I could do it first myself. And whatever blocks were in me, I removed them first and I mastered that whole concept and I taught it to them. So every teacher can do it. I mean, it's a very beautiful experience to understand that what I did not understand as a student, as a teacher, because of this responsibility, when I see such beautiful souls in front of me, how can I tamper with their minds? So I the teacher makes that effort to first clear her own blockages and learn the topics thoroughly so that it could be taught well. And there is a joy in that. And then you realize, अरे ये इतना easy था, तब तो समझ में नहीं आया. But at least अब I can make it easy for my children. So this is the kind of the dawn, the usher the dawn and defeat the dawn. So that's about it. And here are some good reads, which actually are they. These are the books I have read, and this is not mere advocacy. Again, I say they really jerk you up, and they are beautiful reads. Sri Aurobindo on education, a must for every education. So is J. Krishnamurti on education. Then The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry is the only book he wrote. He was a pilot. And this Little Prince talks about everything. And it is a hard hitting book on assessments and how elders think about children. How simple life is for a child and how complicated we make it. You know. Then The Dancing Bully Masters by Gary Zukav. And when I read this book, I could never understand Schrodinger's equation and how simply he put it. And not only that, he told us this fear factor or anything like that, it, anything difficult is actually very easy. It is only made difficult by not you, but by certain factors. And when you are able to see that, learning becomes very easy. Then surely you are joking, Mr. Feynman, by Richard Feynman. It's a biography. He got the Nobel Prize in physics, in quantum physics. And his life, he led like a free bird. And his biggest teacher was his father. And there are many conversations on how he used to play pranks. And even in those pranks, he was using physics. And it was such a joy. He could only, there, right from his very childhood, he was very fortunate to experience this experiential learning and nothing worked for him. And it's a very hilarious book, but it's a very beautiful read. Then How Children Learn by John Holt and How Children Fail by John. It gives every teacher, I feel, should read that. Then The Philosophy and Practice of Integral Education. Because the answers to all education, whatever is ailing the education, unless we go in for psychic education and unless we go in for integral education, we will not find the answers. And we will be caught in a rat race. And then we will do a high, and then we will think, ye kyun nahi, why this is not working, why that is not working. But when we embark on integral education and we start understanding psychic education, then everything falls into place. Another quotation from this is a very favorite of mine, so I would end with this uh, quote by J. Krishnamurti. Education, in the true sense, is helping the individual to be mature and free, to flower greatly in love and goodness. That is what we should be interested in, and not in shaping the child according to some idealistic pattern. Thank you. I will stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mithu, for this comprehensive and enlightening session. Let's open the session to the participants. Participants, if you have any comments to share or if you have any questions, the session is open. Please just unmute yourself and speak up, or you can send your messages in the chat box and I can
Any
read.
reflections also would do.
Yeah.
I'm sure assessment is something that we have all undergone. And many of the things, the trauma, the stress, anxiety, we all have experienced.
So during the session, there were a few messages. PTG says a good teacher makes the effort. And there's also a question, is there any board which follows such assessment? While you were talking about the assessment style there.
There is no such board, unfortunately, that follows this kind of an assessment. But just I said, as being right is not always right. In primary and in middle school, the board doesn't actually play a picture. The boards, when you talk of board exams and all, the boards matter then, that kind of an assessment. But yes, gladly, schools, many schools I know, have started tweaking this. And though they say that the affiliation is by CBSE or ICSE and all, till primary and middle school, there is no compulsion to actually follow any board. You have a lot of freedom. And this is the time when these kind of things can be readily brought in into that. So if sometimes you have to fool, I don't know, somebody from the directorate should not hear me, but if somehow you can fool the directorate also in doing certain things which you actually believe in, and promoting this kind of an assessment system or having this freedom, yes, schools like Mirambika, I have never seen parents over there under any stress, or the children, and because it's assessment is a part of it, largely. I said that the way you educate, the system of education that you follow, how you educate, and what is the method that you follow, will also largely define the patterns of assessment that you follow. And ideally, there should not be any stress in assessments, because the moment you bring in stress, even if the child knows, he will goof up. So, if there can be a system where it's a very relaxed way, fortunately, I can say my daughter went to a school up till primaries, though it is a CBSE board, it is under CBSE board. Till class 5, actually, I never came to know that assessments were happening also. They were happening, but I never came to know of it. The child did not come to know of it. So these kind of systems can be found if one is really very conscientious and well-meaning for the child, and administrators also can do this. At least in primary and middle school, you can tweak the system a lot, because there is no check. Textbooks are just tools. Syllabus also you can largely devise on your own. You can bring in a totally experiential. There are one or two schools in Delhi who have totally turned experiential. They teach through the experiential teaching method, and it can be done.
Thanks, ma'am. Dr. Bijlani, sir, would you like to share your thoughts, please?
Thank you, Arunima. Thank you, Mithu, for that wonderful talk, very candid sharing, and you brought together your own experiences, especially in relation to assessment as a student, when you were yourself a student, then as a teacher, and as a parent. And that made it very intimate, personal, and relevant, because, as you said, uh, most important learning is experiential, and you shared your experiences during all these phases through which you yourself gone, and as a person, a reflective person, a person who has been contemplating the process of education, uh, your experiences and the way you have looked at them, the way you have processed them and digested them, would be of great value to any educationist. Uh, I'll speak a little briefly about the topic itself, the dawn of assessment, the DON, dawn. Huh? That just shows the dominant role that assessment plays in education. And I'd shared with you, but probably you forgot, that interesting quote from Stella Lowry, who, has brought it out in a very witty way, that uh, assessment is the tail that wags the dog of education. Assessment, looks like a small little tail, as a little insignificant part of education. But at the same time, this tail is so powerful that instead of the dog, if we consider the entire system of education to be a dog, instead of the dog wagging the tail, it is the tail, that is the assessment, that wags the dog of education. Now, what she has sort of further said is that it is assessment that determines the learning styles of students. And it is the learning styles of students that basically determine whether as a life, they'll become lifelong learners, self-motivated learners, whether they'll find learning to be fun, and what are the faculties of learning that they will develop. Now, all these things are a part of the learning style that the children choose. To some extent, learning styles can be individual and inborn. Like some will be more of auditory learners, some will be more of visual learners, some will be more uh, systematic, somehow will somehow make some order out of chaos. I mean, all these types of patterns exist. But still, there are certain things which are basically guided by the assessment system, the tools of assessment that we use. What is it that is being rewarded in the exams? That is what determines what type of a intellect the child finds useful in exams, because exams do play a very dominant role in life, which they should not. But the fact is that uh, the apart from the child himself feeling attaching some value to the assessment in exams, he finds that the parents, the society, the peer group, everybody is as if evaluating him as an individual primarily on the basis of how many marks the child got in the exam. And what is rewarded in the exam, therefore, makes a lot of difference to what the child will learn and how the child will look at the process of learning. Uh, and therefore, assessment is important. And the on the other hand, while I mean this is ideal, and there is no dearth of the documents we have produced uh, ever since you talked about the minimum level of learning and so on and so forth. Uh, Starting with that and the latest, if documents and smart expressions could solve problems, all our problems in education would have been solved long ago. But the fact is that, as you said, I mean, about the constitution and about the formative and summative assessment, when these documents are actually given a practical shape by people with ordinary tendencies and inclinations, then you find that instead of any improvement, you find the ground reality hardly changes. We end up somehow beating the system. It's always possible to do that. And therefore, the gap between the vision that these documents create and the reality that exists, that gulf remains huge. And that is what basically creates the problem in education. But all the same, there are a few other things I think which are important, no matter what system of education you use and what system of assessment you use. And to some extent, you hinted on that also, because certainly, I mean, we should improve upon all these, the system of education and the system of exams, so that we create uh, individuals who love learning, find learning to be fun, are self-motivated learners, and uh, uh, they question things. They depend more on observation than on bookish learning. They should be capable of original, creative, logical, critical thinking. I mean, that is important. But all the same, what is also important is that no matter what system you adopt, there will be categorization. There will be those who will do better than others in any form of assessment. And as you said, assessment is a reality in life. You can improve upon the assessment, but you can't do away with assessment. So there will be a gradation. And depending upon that gradation will be the selections in some of the most wanted courses, etc. So firstly, of course, I mean, we should try to fit the course to the child and not try to push every child into the same type of career. That is another area altogether, how children should choose a career. But the gradation will be there, and every child will not be able to get everything that the child wants. Now, what is important, therefore, to understand is that we also somehow, as a society, the teachers, the parents, and everybody else in the society, in the world around put together, somehow the child picks up the signal that not getting into a particular course of study is not the end of the world. Because that is the type of impression that the children very often develop. And that not only creates a lot of anxiety before the child has come to know whether I have got through or not, whether I've got through the course that I was looking for, but it creates a lot of depression if the child does not get into it. And sometimes even anticipating that I will not get into it, the child is so depressed, the child commits suicide. I mean, this suicides in young age are in fact at a remarkable sort of have reached a remarkable height now. And a lot of it is because of this anxiety, as if not getting into a particular course of study is the end of the world. The other side of the coin is equally important for the child to realize that getting into a particular course, no matter how much wanted it is by in terms of society, social sort of perception, getting into a particular course is not the passport to happiness. That's also equally important because ultimately we all want to be happy. We want our children to be happy, but we create the impression for the child as if the happiness itself depends upon getting into a particular course. Not only that, if our love makes the child happy, we also create the impression that we love you only if you uh, get this many marks, crack such and such exam, get into such and such course. Of course, parental love is unconditional, but the child is not mature enough to understand that even if I don't fulfill these expectations, the parents will go on loving me. The child doesn't understand that. Child takes us very seriously. And therefore, the child develops another type of anxiety as to whether these parents will really abandon me, so to say, if I'm not able to come up to their expectations. So both these things are important, that not getting into a particular course is not the end of the world, and getting into a particular course is not the passport to happiness. Happiness itself is also not the goal of life. But the fact is that if we address the genuine goal of life, happiness follows as a byproduct. And therefore, even temporarily, for a short period, if the child learns that yes, happiness can be the goal of my life, if not the goal, at least wanting to be happy is not a sin, but then discover in the process of education what is it that brings genuine, lasting happiness. And that is where integral education, particularly psychic education, comes in. Because the child is discovering that true happiness does not come from getting anything that I want. True happiness comes from giving, giving as an expression of love. That is what the child should discover in the process of education while the child is going through school and whatever the child is picking up from the parents and the society. So when the child develops that chain that I should fill my life with love, love will be expressed by giving, giving will live to give rise to lasting happiness. Happiness is what I'm looking for, and nothing else will guarantee really genuine lasting happiness. If the child picks up that, then the child will be fulfilling the genuine purpose of life, which is spiritual growth, which follows from the same thing. And the child will also not be so anxious about getting into a particular course. So we try to fit the child's talents and abilities to the course, and then also make the child realize that, well, this is probably what you are made for, but there are other alternatives. Nobody is made for only being a, nobody is made fit for only one thing in life. There are so many other things where your talents can be utilized and also monetized, because certainly we have to make a living, but same time, that is for that it's not essential to do only one particular thing, and doing that one particular thing doesn't last, it doesn't guarantee happiness. uh, for this, sometimes when people who talk about these issues to me, I tell them to encourage their child, when the child is reaching that career choosing stage, two books by Eric Siegel. Eric Siegel, is a famous novelist. One of the books is Class, and the other is Doctors. Both these books have a similar pattern. In Doctors, he starts with a set of medical students, first year medical students in Harvard Medical School. That is the only thing that is common to them. And then their personalities start emerging. And if you see their unfolding of their life over the next 30 or 40 years, which is what the novel is about, you find that their lives have diverged so much. Some of them are happy, some are not so happy, some are very unhappy and miserable. But being happy or unhappy or miserable has nothing to do with the fact that they succeeded in becoming doctors. So that's what the child should learn, that just getting into a particular course of study does not mean anything. By the end of another few decades, 3, 4 decades, life would have leveled me the way it levels everybody. There will be ups and downs, but I can still, what guarantees me peace and happiness is how I look at those events rather than those events not happening in my life. And That again takes us to the spiritual way of looking at these things. The other one is similar class, where they start as students in the same class in a college, not studying medicine, but something else. And then again, over the next 30, 40 years, how their lives diverge. If I think children have gone through these two novels, they would understand life much better and not say that, well, getting into a particular course of study is all what can guarantee happiness, and not getting into it, therefore, is the end of the world. Sorry, I digressed a bit and also went on much longer than I should have. But then somehow I find these issues are becoming such vital issues in the society today that I thought maybe, although we are running out of time, we have already run out of time by about 20 minutes. I still went on and on. I'm a born teacher. So you place a mic in front of, and I have a mic here. You place a mic in front of a teacher and trust himself.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bijlani, sir. Sumit, ma'am, you had raised the hand. If you can quickly share your.
Yeah, I think we are kind of out of time. And also, I think Dr. Ramesh did touch upon some of the things I also wanted to comment upon. But very quickly, firstly, thank you, Mithu. This was, very, very, I think the world needs to hear this. So many more people. And I've been a Mirambika parent, and, I've been on this side, which we call the alternative. But I do talk about, how do we mainstream this alternative? Because, like I say, like, why are the children in DPS and other schools, why aren't they like Mirambika? Because for us, this is so natural. But the query does come from the place that I also experience, parents in Mirambika or even outside Mirambika, or let's say in this alternative or a holistic education paradigm, right? When children do go out of it, it does seem to be a bit of a bubble, right? Because we are all living in this, and we don't want it to be a bubble, but it is. And the outside world is cruel and competitive, and and there have been instances, and of course every child is different, etc., but there is this angst, can I say, and that's also coming into the children, that how do they fit in and what do they do, and some of them do struggle, and some, again, it's an individual thing, but I did wanted to place this, and then the larger paradigm about how we need to regenerate and reimagine our systems, right? Because we can't be doing this in a corner, and our systems, which is a larger, and I think somewhere NEP tried to do that, but again, there are implementation issues, etc. So just wanted to place that, and also thank you for choosing this topic, and it's so relevant to our times.
Thanks, ma'am. Thank you. So, yeah, so as always, the recording of today's talk, like all Yes Talks, will be published on our YouTube channel, Yes Spirituality. Thank you so much once again, Mithu, for this wonderful session. And participants, we thank you as well for being with us today. We close today's session now with a moment of peaceful silence. Namaste.